Nimenhao, wata minsu Daniel Rotero, wata kunsuo, Buenos Aires Tashie, Argentina. Before starting with my talk, I want to thank the organizers of this meeting and I hope to be a very successful one. And particularly, I want to thank Mr. David Wu for his involvement in the organization of this meeting. The quotation shown here is part of a book chapter on quinoa ecophysiology, published 2 years ago as part of a book series named Crop Physiology, which is a reference book for our field of research. I want to call your attention to the title of the book. It says Case History for Mayo Crops. So, for the editors of this book, quinoa is or could become a mayo crop. However, can we predict what the future of quinoa will be in 5, 10, 50 or 100 years? For sure we can, but we are researchers, we are quinoa producers, and we can make a significant contribution to the future of this crop.
This map by Gabriela Alandi and collaborators, published in 2020, shows when research and evaluation started, divided by timeline and country criteria. Thus, as from the 80s, the number of countries involved had increased steadily, with a remarkable steep rise at 2013, the International Year of Quinoa, reaching nearly 100 countries involved in research and development today. Quinoa export started in Bolivia and was soon followed by Peru, being both countries traditional quinoa producers. As shown, export increased exponentially after the year 2000 and currently average around 30,000 tons per year. The inset shows the price evolution. International prices also increased and reached more than $6,000 per ton in 2014, as a coincidence of high international demand with a serious drought in the Andes. Peru was able to match and overcome Bolivia's production due to its better climate, more suitable for quinoa production, and was soon reflected in its export volumes. Peru became the main quinoa exporter with twice the volume of Bolivia. Again, prices show a peak in 2014. The Andean quinoa export volumes fluctuations and its impact on the international prices raise concern in the global market. An article published by The Economist in 2019 suggested that countries should resort to local production to become independent of these fluctuations. Conditions for European countries were already mature, and they were soon followed by other countries, China among them. The increasing diversification in quinoa was soon reflected in export values. Although the market is still dominated by Peru and Bolivia, a long list of other countries are participating in it. Thus, the sum of the European production already matches the Bolivian production. China is still not included in FAO's statistics. International prices fluctuation affected the Andean countries, particularly Bolivia, where national averages cannot overcome the 500 to 600 kilos per hectare due to soil and climate limitations. This map shows quinoa production area of the intersalar region in southern Bolivia highlands, where most quinoa real is grown. The areas in red show quinoa crops expanded from 687 hectares in the year 2000 to 7,460 in 2010 and to 39,834 hectares in 2014, dropping to 25,444 in 2021. Besides prices, soil degradation linked to land use intensification is contributing to this decline.
Could be thought that the problem of getting profits with quinoa is one of low productivity environments, for example, those of the Bolivian highlands. But this table shows a different situation. This comes from a study run a few years ago in a company named QUINOA in the desert coast of Arequipa, Peru, where quinoa started to be grown a few years ago. This system in particular is a conventional one, highly intensive, so it has a high use of agrochemicals, fertilizers, irrigation, etc. And the climate there is one of cool temperatures and high radiation. So in many ways, this is an ideal environment to grow and get high yields of quinoa. In this particular example, the yields obtained were more than 3 tons per hectare, but even so, the final profit was just $47 per hectare, pretty low. And as part of personal conversation with one of the owners of this company, he told me that sometimes, even with yield higher than 5 tons, they are having problems with getting profits there. If we are not able to control price, how can we contribute to higher profits? And there are 2 ways we can do that from the productivity and efficiency issue side. One is through breeding, the other one is through crop management. And in the last decade, both issues made a 50% contribution to yield improvement. Quinoa breeding in China is advancing fast with several breeding programs and several registered commercial varieties. It includes several techniques, several approaches, and from our field of research data crop physiology, our contribution can be made at this stage of crop evaluations in the field, kind of a multi-environment evaluation or physiological screenings of breeding lines. These 2 publications summarize quinoa management options in different parts of the world. The problem with these kind of publications is that they are hard to extrapolate and work as a receipt. So, in this way, it is a rigid approach. The alternative to this is to use a crop physiology approach, which is a more functional one, starting with some few basic principles of how a crop works. This approach is used today in Argentina, for example, not only to educate new agronomists, but also in the field is more and more popular.
The identification of quinoa genetic groups based on agronomic performance facilitate genotype selection for different environments. The one from sea level environments in central and southern Chile is the most differentiated one and adapted to temperate environments. Temperature sensitivity of developmental rate, the inverse of cycle duration, differs between the genetic groups. Those from the inter-Andean valleys, G1, from Colombia to Argentina, have the lowest sensitivities and longest cycle duration. On the other hand, the sea level ones, G4, have the highest sensitivities and shortest cycles. The transect to the right shows the altitude explored by traditional quinoa crops in northwest Argentina. From 3,000 above sea level in the highlands, locally named Puna, to less than 3,000 in dry valleys near 2,500 in the eastern humid valleys. Through thousands of years, shorter cycles were selected the higher the altitude, as shown in the figure to the left for time to flowering. This cycle reduction is linked to a similar one on photoperiod sensitivity, higher in low altitude environments.
We were recently able to precise the duration of the critical period of yield determination in quinoa. It goes from early before first anthesis to mid-seed filling. These results are going to be published soon and involves experiments run in parallel in Ecuador, Peru, Chile, and Argentina using shading treatment. When approaching the responses to water availability from the ecophysiological perspective, we use an approach which was developed by John Basura, an Australian physiologist. He expressed yield as the product of several variables. One of them is crop evapotranspiration, that's the total amount of water used by crop. This is multiplied by the ratio between crop transpiration and evapotranspiration, then by transpiration efficiency, so the amount of biomass which can be produced per unit transpiration, and finally harvest index, which is the ratio between grain yield and total plant biomass. As it can be seen, transpiration efficiency, which is usually the focus of basic physiological research, is just part of the whole equation. Another concept arising from this relationship is that of water productivity. What is water productivity? It's the relationship between yield and crop evapotranspiration. This figure shows the relationship between crop yield and crop evapotranspiration in quinoa, arising from several environments and several experiments around the world. This approach is named a boundary response because it defines an upper limit and was developed by two researchers, French and Schulz, in the 80s to understand what is limiting cereal production, particularly wheat, in Southeast Australia. What the figure shows is that the upper limit for quinoa is around 13.3 kilos of grain per millimeter of water used by the crop, which is a pretty low one if compared with the values at the bottom right of the figure, save for the example of sunflower. But perhaps more relevant than that upper limit, which is reached just in a few cases, are the many points below and away from the line. So those conditions are conditions where it is no water what is limiting productivity, but other factors. These factors can be mismatch of sowing days, can be low fertility, can be wrong fertilization, can be bad weed or disease control. And it is all what can be improved within the limits set by water to approach this upper limit. When we look at yield responses to nitrogen use by the crop, the approach is pretty similar. So here, yield is regarded as the product of nitrogen uptake, which is the amount of nitrogen which is taken by the crop from the soil, nitrogen harvest index, which is the proportion of the nitrogen in the crop which goes to the seeds, and the percent of nitrogen in the seed. And from this relationship, another one can be developed, which is called nitrogen utilization efficiency, or sometimes just physiological efficiency for the use of nitrogen. This is the relationship between yield and nitrogen uptake, and it is the product of nitrogen harvest index and percent nitrogen. Again, nitrogen harvest index, if it is improved, so if a higher proportion of nitrogen goes to the grain, the efficiency goes up. But if the protein content goes up, then the efficiency becomes low. That's the reason, for example, why legumes can never reach an efficiency similar to cereals. This figure shows, again, from different experiments in different parts of the world, the relationship of yield to nitrogen uptake, and it shows that quinoa has a high capacity to modify its yield depending on nitrogen availability, what is good if we want to quinoa to become a major crop. The other part of the slide shows how this nitrogen utilization efficiency gets lower the higher the nitrogen used by the crop. So starting with around 60 kilos of grain per hectare, it ends being lower than 20 kilos. And 60 kilos can be right, but only can be obtained in low productivity environments. We have to find a way to keep as much stable as possible this efficiency in quinoa, and this has been done for several major crops in the world by selecting explicitly for some of these traits. What is interesting is that one of the factors behind this efficiency is harvest index. If we are able to maintain or increase harvest index in higher productivity environments, then we also can increase, perhaps duplicate, the value of this efficiency in high productivity environments in quinoa. And if we want to do quinoa, or we want to grow quinoa in high productivity environments, we have to look for the way to do this. What is our research expertise in quinoa? We have been making contribution to the analysis and evaluation of multi-environmental trials in quinoa, starting with the FAO experiments conducted in different countries and done in the 1998 and 1999 years. Second, we can contribute to the evaluation analysis of the climate restriction for quinoa production in China based on an ecophysiological understanding. We can contribute to setting criteria and best method for field phenotyping of quinoa, both at the breeding stage or at the production stage, and we can assist projects on ecophysiological research in China. I wanted to end my talk with some final thoughts. Big companies perhaps will not pay attention to quinoa until the production is perhaps higher than 1 million tons. So we're perhaps far from that yet. But my reflection is that we live in a world pretty competitive. The question is, what is better for quinoa today? Competition or cooperation? I am a biologist by degree, and in biology there are situations which favor competition and other situations which favor cooperation. It is my conviction that cooperation is what we need most today if quinoa is going to become successful as a crop.